Hey, thank you for clicking on my video. I am about to do a charcoal drawing of Izuku Midoriya from My Hero Academia. So I'm starting off the drawing with some really loose lines just to get some playful energy and to remind myself not to be too precious with the work. What I mean by precious is to not be careful. I found that you could actually be a little too stiff with your work. When I'm working, I like my work to look sort of edgy and have some playfulness to it. I don't really do a lot of fan art, but I really thought this character was cool. And in modern day anime, I think this is one of the best representations of anime art. The story is cool, but I really like the art. And so I wanted to see what I could come up with by drawing this character. I wanted to do a take on Izuku that was a bit mentally challenged, as if he had completely blown a fuse and just had it with everything. To do this, I tried to make the stare of the eyes disturbing without losing much of the essence of the character that we all know. For me personally, the challenge of doing fan art is trying to depict the character without losing too much of the originality of the character. For me, the challenge of doing fan art is making the character my own while walking that thin line of not losing too much of the recognizability of the character, right? So I could do a character that's real thrashing in style, but I also want to make sure that when people who know that character could just look at that work and recognize who that character is. I've done work in the past that I really liked and other people's like, oh wow, that looks dope. But in the end, they didn't know who the character was. So in this particular work, I'm trying to pull that off where people would know who that is. I'm gonna leave it to you to make that decision on whether you understood who this character was or whether it was given away by the title of the video. I've always been fascinated by seeing mainstream characters translated into a fine art style. Some of my favorite artists actually have done this, such as Ashley Wood. He has these really cool images in the way that he draws Batman, and also the way he does Astro Boy. His paintings are really cool. Also, Kent Williams, one of my favorite painters. He actually does these Batman and Wolverine images that are just spectacular. It just blows your mind. Later on, I'm going to add some really dark shadows to the hands, which are going to make the hands pop out and separate from the body, creating an illusion of depth. Now I'm adding the preliminary shading or mid-tones to the body. This is generally what I do before I go in with the darks, and I like to try to save highlights for the very end. I'm using charcoal in this drawing because I wanted it to have some drama to it, and I feel charcoal captures drama really easy. Like, all you have to do is just do a couple smudges and some really dark areas, and you can capture that dramatic energy with charcoal really easy. Now, by adding darkness to the tips of these fingers, you can already see how the hand is starting to pop forward towards the camera, creating that illusion that the hand is reaching out towards you. Because I'm not using an eraser in this drawing, I'm being much more careful about the areas where I want to be highlights. Now that I'm adding midtones and darker values to the fingertips, you can kind of see how this hand is actually starting to reach out a little bit more. One thing I like about doing fan art is seeing a very popular, well-known character done in my own signature style. So I'm going to add highlights to the fingers on the left side. So I'm being very careful not to touch that side of the fingers. But I will say that using a paper stump would have made it a lot easier when smudging areas going into tight corners and things like that. It's just much easier to control the smudge of the charcoal when you have that very sharp, fine tip of the paper stump. Now I'm using a piece of paper to mask the body, and then I take the charcoal dust and just smear it along the edge of that paper. This is going to create an illusion that there's a highlight on the edge of the body when I lift up the paper. This is a technique that I really enjoy doing because it's really satisfying to see highlights created without using an eraser or going in with some white and painting them in. Now I'm adding smudges to the background, not only to create highlights on the body, but also to add a little bit of atmosphere to the background as well. Here you see me rubbing the charcoal on the edge of the paper and then dragging that over onto the artwork. What this does is it allows me to create a darker smudge than if I just rub the charcoal in another area of the paper and then dip my finger in that and then carried it over to the artwork. Making smudges like this can also be done using a paper stump, and you can also do smudges like this using powdered charcoal, but in this case I didn't have those things close by, so I just did with what I had. However, I do have charcoal in the studio. It's just that a lot of times I get inspired to do a piece of work and I don't really feel like going to search for all the supplies needed, so I'll just use whatever I have right there, and that creates somewhat of a problem-solving brain teaser type situation where I'm like, oh, what am I going to come up with, being that I'm limited and constrained in the supplies that I'm using. Now I'm going back in with the pencil and adding a little details and textures here and there. And here's a section where I'm going to create the highlights on the left side of the fingers. I'm being very careful with my fat little fingers, trying not to go into those areas and ruin that white part that I want to make the highlight on those fingers because I could totally take the corner of an eraser and just erase it out. But again, for me, it's like a brain teaser to see how much I can do with little. Thanks for watching my video, and if you like what you saw, a good way to share it with a lot of other people is by simply hitting that like button. Make sure you get the notifications, and I'll see you in the next one.